So we're going to move from the scaling owner-operator to the scaling strategic. Over the past few years, one shift we've seen is the perceived power of snacking to serve as a potential avenue of rejuvenation for some of our larger legacy food companies. At the end of the year last year, Campbell's and Hershey both doubled down on the potential of snacking occasions, investing billions at the end of the year. But for Hershey, even before it bought Amplify brands and its popcorn and protein bar and chip brands, the company had made important moves. It had purchased Crave Jerky and Bark Thins, both important products that have reshaped the idea of what successful natural food brands can be and what they can achieve. Now, Will Lisman is in charge of making sense of all those moves that Hershey has made, how they've come together, how they'll integrate into a revived candy giant, and what other moves they might make. He's here to talk about the way the snack business, the incubation business, and the chocolate business are all going to relate to all of you and to Hershey's, where he's the president of the Emerging Brands Unit. Please welcome Will Lisman.
Yep. Good morning. I am your token strategic for day 2. But I'm really excited to be here. I've actually been in this emerging brand space for the better part of a decade. First as an advisor working at a strategy consulting firm that worked closely with private equity and venture capital firms that were investing in the space. And as Jeff alluded to, more recently as an operator at Hershey, where I was actively involved in Bark Thins once we acquired that business, and more recently as we've set up this new division to incubate our emerging brand portfolio, leading the charge with one phenomenal team. Today I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about Hershey and our journey with emerging brands. What we've learned, what we look for when we make acquisitions, and ultimately how we approach incubating and scaling emerging brands within a much larger company. And one important thing to keep in mind is, for us, we're still in the early innings of this journey. We've gotten some things right along the way, but we've also made our fair share of mistakes. And so to Jeff, to Carol, to the entire team at NOSH, thank you for the opportunity, this platform, and the chance to share our story. So as this group's well aware, we are living through an unprecedented amount of change in the industry. And it all starts with the consumer. Demographic shifts, new definitions of quality, changing preferences in terms of how people are eating, and ultimately, different thinking around what the role of a brand ultimately is. That, coupled with the continued evolution of retail, the rise of digital commerce, massive consolidation throughout the industry, new winners being created, other companies going away. And technology is the one thread that ripples through all of this. It's impacting every aspect of the value chain, from how we farm, to how we manage inventory with our retailers, to how consumers shop, and ultimately to how we as brands connect and engage with them. And all this change is putting pressure on big CPGs like Hershey. Growth is a lot harder to come by. Margins are being pressured by retailer consolidation. Margins are being pressured by inflation. And with all that and all this disruption, it's forcing companies big and small to rethink strategy, both in terms of what they're doing today and how they're going to run their businesses in the future. And for us at Hershey, we see this as an opportunity. And at the end of the day, it's part of our DNA We've been in business for over 120 years. Our founder, Milton Hershey, was a serial entrepreneur. He failed 3 times before he got traction in the confection business and got the Hershey company up and running. When he formed the company, it was his drive for growth and his passion for social impact that helped create what is today the original purpose-driven company. Our largest shareholder is still the Milton Hershey Trust, which endows a school for underprivileged children in central Pennsylvania. And that mission is still woven into the fabric of this great organization. And we're energized, we're excited, we're inspired about this opportunity to take this 120-year-old company and write that next chapter. And as Jeff alluded to, for us, that next chapter is taking candy and still having that be a big part of the business, but ultimately transforming Hershey into a snacking powerhouse. We're going to get there organically, but we're also going to get there through acquisitions, and that's going to play a role. And the good news is the consumer's creating some tailwinds for us. We're seeing growth at both ends of the snacking continuum. On the indulgent side, this is where our core brands and candy plays. We see opportunities to bolt on through M&A and ultimately add brands to the portfolio that are going to allow us to tap into new consumers, new occasions. And at the other end, with better-for-you snacking, this is where M&A is going to play an even more important role as we try to drive and build scale in a diversified way. So what do we look for? It all starts with strategic fit. We're on a snacking mission, and so we're going to be focused on snacking categories. To the extent that those are categories where we already play, we're very open to and looking for bolt-on acquisitions. And to the extent we're stretching into new categories, we're going to be looking for scale acquisitions, brands that have already achieved success and have infrastructure built within a category, such as a Skinny Pop, that allow us to push into new parts of the store. We're also with fit looking for cultural fit. Peter hit on this morning. Culture is king. And so we want to make sure whether it's the founder, the CEO that's been brought in to scale the business, the rest of the team, that there's cultural fit with Hershey. Because at the end of the day, we're going to be in this together, and we need to make sure that everybody's buying into the new mission, the values of the culture of this organization. Secondly, we are looking for distinctiveness. And so Porvi hit on this. We are most interested in brands that are creating pioneering categories, disrupting existing categories. We're not looking for me too players. We're not looking for something that's marginally better than the existing offerings in the market. And so for us, brands like Crave, which essentially created a new category within jerky, are really attractive. A brand like Bark Thins, which has taken chocolate and made it snackable, is really attractive. That's what we're looking for. It's this distinctiveness both in terms of the brand and the product. With that, we're also looking for proof of concept with consumers. And there's 2 things we pay very close attention to on this front. It's velocity, and specifically base velocity, and repeat rate. We want to make sure that there is proof of concept before we go and make a big investment to acquire business. Building on that, we're also looking for quality growth. In this day and age, we are taking a long, hard look at the growth algorithm of a business. We want to see quality growth. It's easy to go out and get a bunch of new distribution, to put a bunch of trade against the business. But in a lot of cases, it's not sustainable. We're looking for sustainability and also a margin structure that as we scale the business is going to allow us to reinvest in the team and ultimately in the brand. And then finally, we want to see runway. We are looking for untapped potential that through our partnership, we can unlock and take the business to a brand new level. So if that's what we look for, what makes it work? Once the deal is done, Hershey comes in, now we're working together. How do we make sure that this is a success? I've spent a lot of time as a student studying this topic, more recently as an operator, have also connected with experts in the industry. We've looked introspectively at our own experience as a company on Crave, on Bark Thins. we've reached out and we've worked with the likes of a John Rapogel at 7th Generation. We've spoken with John Foraker, gotten a good understanding of the experience that they've had with Annie's at General Mills. And while there's ultimately no secret sauce, there are some key themes, golden rules, best practices that emerge that ultimately transcend categories and companies. And the first is, it all starts with a cultivation mindset. We need to ban the word integration. It's not about integration. As a strategic, we've just, in some cases, written a check for $300 million to acquire a business. We're not here to integrate it and suck it in. We want to cultivate and ultimately nurture that business. We want to play the long game, and that's going to require us to establish a strategic North Star and not blink at the first signs of a struggle. We're, again, in this for the long game, and it all starts with that notion of cultivation. Secondly, it's all about people and culture. We've ultimately got to get the right leaders in place with an aligned mission, values, and incentives. In some cases, this may be the founder. In some cases, it may require bringing in a new leader to help run the business. But culture is king, and getting the right people on the bus is make or break in terms of the success of the business. The next big piece of the equation here is structure. And Peter hit on this morning. Don't break it. So our bias is towards independence. And the idea here is you've just spent all this money acquiring a very successful business. Don't rush in to quote unquote help. And so if you're the entrepreneur or the founder on the other side of the table, there is going to be a desire to partner, but you've got to be careful that you're protecting your business. And while there's often positive intent behind it, recognize that the business model of a big company and a small emerging brand are very different, and help can take very different forms. And so structure is a big way to enable that. And the approach that we take is we ultimately want support to be more pull versus push. And so with an Amplify, with a Skinny Pop, we want them to come to us and say, these are the 3 to 4 areas where we really need your help, and here's where we don't. And that's critically important. We've got to have a very, very clear sense of what help looks like, and as a strategic coming in, like Hershey, where we can add value and where we can't and should just stay out of the way. With that, there's a need for a very different operating model than you typically find in a big company. It's speed over scale. It's all about having agility in how we operate. And yes, as the business scales and grows, there's a need to continue to evolve the management approach. We want to make sure that early on, we're not corporatizing this. And so we want to keep that agile operating model in place. And we actually see opportunities as we acquire companies for some of those best practices in terms of how they work and how they run their business to flow back into Hershey and enable the broader transformation of the company. The final piece of this is building on the operating model, being very clear about what those 3 to 4 distinctive capabilities are that you need to build and scale within this business to take it to that next level. You've now got a parent in place that has very deep pocketbooks, but you can't be all things to all people. So you've got to be very smart and very prescriptive about where and how you're going to win. That could be with marketing and understanding how you're going to take a precision approach to build the brand and connect with consumers. It could be in terms of how you go to market and how you're going to activate and merchandise in stores. But be very clear, you can't be all things to all people. You got to pick those 3 or 4 places where you're going to win. So if that's what makes it work, if those are the golden rules, where does it go off track? When does it start to fall apart? These are just some common pitfalls. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list. These are some things that we've observed. Some of them we've lived through. Some of these mistakes we've made ourselves as a company. And the first one is just being impatient. It's going too far, too fast in pursuit of synergy. This can manifest itself on the top line in terms of pursuing a lot of distribution that the brand's not ready for. It could be launching a bunch of innovation before you have the core of the brand well established. It can also manifest itself on the cost side, going aggressively after cost savings. And so again, it's play that long game. Understand why we ultimately acquire these businesses. It's for the long-term opportunity. It's not to hit the financial economics of the acquisition in year one. Those are important, but we can't sacrifice the short term for the long term. So we've got to be patient. Next, we can't lose that founder's mindset and disruptive edge. Yes, there may be transitions in leadership, but at the end of the day, as we staff the team, we need to have the right folks in place. Growth is king. We need folks with a growth mindset and ultimately the right incentives to keep everything on track. A third big watch out is smothering the emerging business with big company systems and process. In most cases, we are acquiring a business with 20, 30, 40 employees. We're a $7 billion company with 18,000 employees globally. If we apply the same process and systems that we use on the big business to the small brand, you're essentially playing the role of wet blanket. You've got this flame, this bright business that's on fire that you've just acquired, and you go in and you smother it with process. Now, this goes back to the first one. It's a balancing act. We don't want to come in and try to microwave it or throw gasoline on the fire and see it go, wow, that's great, all this growth, and then not have it stick. But at the same time, we've got to be careful on the flip side that we're not doing the inverse and applying all this process to the organization. Bureaucracy will kill it. Next, it's failing to preserve what ultimately makes the brand unique, losing that authentic voice. That's very easy to keep intact when it's a small organization with the founder in place. As there's transitions on the business, we've got to be careful that through the marketing lens, we are not corporatizing the brand. And then finally, as the business is scaling, making sure that we're not doing anything that's going to dilute the product or the quality in pursuit of scale. That maybe as we scale manufacturing, we've got to make sure that the quality output that came out of a batch process is now not compromised by the fact that we're scaling manufacturing to support growth on the business. So those are some of the pitfalls. Hershey, as I alluded to, is in the early innings of this journey. We've learned a lot, and we're going to be taking a big next step in the coming months. As most of you are probably aware, we acquired Amplify in Q1 of this year. And this summer, are going to be taking a major step in combining the emerging brand unit at Hershey today, which is less than a year old, with Amplify. And we're going to be establishing a hub in Austin to run this portfolio of emerging brands. It's essentially going to operate as a separate company. And so we're going to live what we've said, create that independence, and ultimately have this new Amplify be the tip of the spear for Hershey as we drive this transformation into a snacking powerhouse. Thanks for your time.
Well, I guess the biggest question is, does this mean you get to move to Austin?
It does. So I've acquired some sunscreen and getting ready for the heat of July's in Texas.
So that's that final idea of taking this whole thing and moving it into an emerging brands hub. At what point did you guys realize this is the step we need to make?
It's been an evolution, and we've learned a lot of things along the way, whether it was with the acquisition of Crave and trying to integrate that business over the last 3-4 years, more recently with Barkthins. I would say it sparked for us around the middle of last year. And at that point in time, we had a new CEO, Michelle Buck, who came into role in March, new leadership coming on board. And together, the new leadership team, with support from those of us that were actually working on the business, came to the decision that if we were really going to be successful with this, we needed a structure that was going to enable it. And trying to run it as part of the big mothership was not the structure that the business needed.
So now you're going to be the captain of a pirate ship instead of the mothership. Is there and you've spent a lot of time looking at these kinds of arrangements. Before this, Will was working as a consultant and helping other large entities plan M&A for, often for emerging brands. You spent a lot of time looking at this. How should brands that are considering this kind of deal, I mean, aside from the obvious, like we're going to make a lot of money, how should they think about measuring whether the captain of that kind of pirate ship is going to be the one to guide them forward within a larger entity?
At the end of the day, there's certainly the business side of the equation here. What's the math? Is the strategic coming in going to pay fair value for the business? But as I touched on, culture is critical. And so this is a two-way relationship. We're coming in to assess the business, but also the founder, the culture, the team that's in place. And vice versa, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you need to be doing the same thing. Is there an alignment of values and mission with the company that I'm ultimately going to hand the keys over to? And so as a founder, you want to know that you're partnering with people that you share the same values with, that you know are not just chasing a bottom line, that are ultimately ready to take the business that you've built and take it to the next chapter and have it be part of an organization that's about more than just selling product, that there is a mission that you can align to. And that's really important, and that's something that's taken us a little bit of time to wrap our arms around, but now plays a big role going forward.
One of the things we heard from Seth Goldman yesterday was the notion that the founder needs to stick around. The founder needs to have a stake in it. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think every situation is different in terms of what the founder would like their role to be.
And what the brand itself is about as well, right?
And so with Crave, John was actively involved in the business for the first year and then stayed on as an advisor. When we acquired Bark Thins, Scott Semmel and I worked hand in glove the first 9-12 months on the business, and then he decided to step aside. Ideally, we want at least 6 to 12 months with the founder still actively involved, and then some form of an advisory relationship going forward, but also acknowledge that there is a desire in some cases to move on and do different things.
What's your assessment of how well strategics are starting to get into this integration role? I mean, are we at the start of the game? Are we at the end of the game?
So I think it's first important to just avoid the temptation to kind of clump all strategics together, because I think we're all in very different places based on the categories that we compete in and where we are on the development curve in terms of emerging brands. And
but this is certainly an emerging or like almost a required strategy now, right?
It is. And I think in general, the broad assessment can be that we're getting a lot better, but we're not all the way to bright. I think there's been a lot of learning. This is uncharted territory for us, and so we're building new muscles as we go. And with the emergence of corporate venture capital, the likes of 301 Inc., what we're doing internally in terms of setting up a new structure, this is going to enable success going forward. But there's a learning curve here, and we're not all the way at the top. We're going to continue to learn as we go. And we're committed to getting this right, but we're also going to continue to make some mistakes along the way, and we just have to wrap our heads around that.
So, captain of the pirate ship, are you signing up new scalawags in the time to come, and how do they reach out to you to do
We are. So we are looking as we bring these businesses together. I mean, one of the benefits is that we now have a lot more scale than we would as Amplify on its own or the Emerging Brand Group on its own. And so with that, we are looking to make a big investment both in the team and in the business. And so there will be opportunities. You're probably going to see a lot of job postings coming up in the next couple of months, recruiters reaching out. In the meantime, I'm going to be here for the balance of the day. If you're interested, please swing by, introduce yourself. Would love to connect.
In addition to jobs, what about brands?
So M&A will play a role. Right now, we're very much focused on digesting, Amplify, and bringing these two businesses together. But once we get our sea legs, to use your pirate analogy, underneath us, we'll be looking to scale this business quickly. We've got a pretty ambitious agenda. This will be roughly a $500 million business today. We want it to be a $1 billion business pretty quickly. And so that's going to be a big part of the growth algorithm for the new organization.
Well, Will, thank you, and good luck with the emerging brands unit.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.